Alright, hello and welcome to a Sunny Book Nook. My name is Sunny. I use they them pronouns. It's June. Happy Pride Month. Today I'm going to be bringing to you my incredibly ambitious June TBR, which I'm in the midst of working through, and aim for the stars, land on the moon, whatever the fuck. 13 books on my physical TBR that I'm trying to complete this month, okay? And you know, if I don't do it, if I don't get it, it's fine, it's not ideal, but I will forgive myself. Historically, I have not been great with monthly TBRs, but it's fucking Pride Month, bro. Like, I need to read my gay, my LGBT physical TBR books because it's getting really atrocious. My like physical TBR shelves. They're looking not great for me. So I kind of have to work on that a bit. And I've also gotten like new books, like newly released books recently as well. That doesn't help my physical TBR situation. Anyway, let's just get right into it. Actually, before we get right into it, I wanted to announce in a video that I have started a Patreon. Woo! I know that the majority of YouTube creators make the majority of their like supplemental or like what their income consists of are like sponsorships from brands. But personally, for the most part, I find sponsorships largely unfit for my brand or like my channel, you know? So, and so instead of that, I've decided to start a Patreon, and that way I can also make extra bonus content and do like movie nights once a month because, as you know, I love lesbian movies, I love movies in general, and I talk about them in my lesbian book to movie recommendations. So yeah, I'm excited to do that, and I said that once I hit 10 members on Patreon, I will post my first video, and I will tell you what my first video is because it has to do with my June TBR. If you become a patron or if you are a patron currently, first of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And second of all, if this idea doesn't sound interesting to you, just let me know. This is just something that I thought about a little bit and I posted on my Goodreads review of said book. Anyway, let's get into it. The first book on my TBR is In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. This book I've already read. Woo! I've completed one part of my June TBR, and yeah, so it's basically, oof, how do I describe this? There's a lot of blood magic, polyamory, bisexuality, family drama, trauma, political intrigue, court politics, and magic, blood, ruling family overthrowing, going situation, princesses, and okay, that's incoherent as fuck. But yeah, I've literally read this and yet here I am not being able to describe the entire thing. So we're following our main character who is a very powerful like blood mage, because of course she is, but her father like was killed right in front of her very eyes when she was like 7 years old, and that's the first scene that we get in the very beginning of the book. And then we kind of figure out more about the world, which is called Thenopolis, and the structure of it, when one day she is trying to save her like GF thing, like her little situationship with this other girl. They're like sitting on the roof or something and they're about to fall off, and she uses her blood magic to save that girl, and in doing so gets like discovered by like the royal guard or whatever the fuck that like she actually does possess this blood magic. What the fuck is it actually called? It doesn't say in the synopsis, but you know, I'm pretty bad with proper nouns, especially with books. So yeah, anyway, it's pretty like, you know, dark, magic, fantasy world, very removed from our current reality. It's a very ye olden days type of semi-medieval vibes of a fantasy setting. So yeah, this is the first book on my TBR, which I've accomplished. And then the next book on my TBR is another sapphic YA fantasy. Oh, did I mention In the Ravenous Dark is a YA? I got it because a gay-looking bookstore clerk at an indie bookstore was like, you need to read this. Have you read it yet? You have to. Because I was telling her about like the different books that I have read and that I have enjoyed. Okay, the next book on my TBR is The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinka. Jacinska. The Dark Tide follows this girl who lives in this like island community thing that is ruled by like the witches, because the witches have created this bond or magical relationship to the sea in which by sacrificing one of the islanders to the tide every year on the full moon of the blah blah blah, the witches can keep the tide, the dark tide, from rising and taking over the island, and thus keeping these islanders and the witches safe. And because the witches have this power, they obviously like rule a kingdom. Well, yeah, rule this island and live in this little palace. Our main character is this girl who is trying to save her brother from being sacrificed. Essentially, every year they pick like a really pretty boy from the island, and he has to be like really hot, and he goes to the palace and then he gets sacrificed. So our main character, her name is Lena. Again, I've read this book. So again, like, okay, yeah, read this book, it's on my TBR, so good. We're already on a better track with this physical TBR than I have been in previous months, because previously I'll be like, I'm gonna read A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I read not even A. So we're already getting off to a better start, you know? Anyway, so the Dark Tide, we're following Lena because she's trying to find her brother who like snuck away from her the night of this like solstice, because it's a big like party event or whatever, and she wants to like lock him in his room so he can't get like taken away and stolen, but of course he does. Well, okay, it's more complicated than that, because there's this guy who was the sacrifice the previous year, but then he escaped the witch and he came back, and everyone in town is like, yo, how the fuck did you do that? And he's like, and he won't tell anyone, but our main character Lena is like kind of in love with him. Ooh. So he and her brother both get, I think, like taken away to the palace or something, and she has to essentially try to break them out because she's a very courageous, kind, spirited girl, main character, and ends up being like this whole Beauty and the Beast situation in which she has to be the substitute in place of her like brother and her bae or whatever the fuck, like not being the sacrifices. And we are sort of alternating in some perspectives between Lena and then Queen Eva. Queen Eva's sister was the witch who got like seduced by the boy that Lena's into last year. So she like died, and she put herself as a sacrifice as a witch to the sea instead of the boy. And Queen Eva, who was her sister, is not really happy about that. Like, she's still traumatized about that shit, so she's not really happy to have the guy who did that like back on the grounds, and then the girl who's in love with him back on the ground. And the witches have like shape-shifting powers and like various magical powers and stuff. But yeah, it's a solid sapphic YA fantasy, because it's sort of an enemies to lovers, like Queen Eva and Lena fall in love, blah blah blah. Like, they don't like each other because why would they? They're on opposite sides. They have different alliances. So yeah, basically the Patreon video concept that I have is comparing these two books, because they're both YA sapphic with a bisexual main character dark fantasies that involve family and political struggle and drama. So yeah, that's the sort of analysis or like video I want to do, because, you know, spoiler alert for my wrap up, I rated both of these like 3-ish stars. And so I want to look at what the similarities are, whether one would like one or the other more and why, and the strengths, the, you know, like stuff like that. Just like how they compare. And because I think there are interesting parallels, and I think it's interesting that I happen to just read them back to back, you know. So those are the first two books on my TBR, and I will be making the comparison video that will be up on Patreon quite soon. But a book that I am in the middle of reading is Love After the End. I'm like halfway through it. It's a short story collection of Indigenous writers. It's all queer, it's all speculative fiction. Yeah, so this book I had suggested in my video that was like, pick what book I should read next, and most people voted for this one. So, and obviously it's Pride Month, so reading this. I'm halfway through it, and I like a lot of these short stories so far. I'm a fan, but so far I don't think it's gonna be like a favorite short story collection. I love short story collections a lot, but I don't know if this is, like, it's an anthology, so it's all different writers and stuff, so I'm glad to get exposed to all these different Indigenous queer authors. As a holistic collection of work, body of work so far, I like it. I'm thinking 3-4 stars so far, but we'll see because I still have to finish the rest of it. So that's the next book on my TBR. Another queer sci-fi speculative fiction short story collection that's on my TBR is Even Greater Mistakes by Charlie Jane Anders, because, okay, so Charlie Jane Anders, I'm pretty sure, is a trans woman, and she's been writing science fiction for years, I'm pretty sure, and I'm a few stories in, but I like them all a lot so far. Like, I think most of them have a very interesting concept and they're being explored in a really interesting way. It really is like sci-fi in a really contemporary, modern, queer, imaginative sort of approach, so I really enjoy that, and I'm excited to get to the rest of this. So yeah, again, I'm doing well with my TBR because like I've actually been reading these books. So the next book that's on my TBR is Acts of Service by Lillian Fishman. This book, I think Jalen from the Bar on the Bookcase has been singing its praises, but I'm really interested to get to this one because it's giving like, you know, hot girl sort of vibes. Jewish NYU woman writer. I don't know if you can see that. You know, if you know me, that's the type of shit that I love. And, you know, if you've seen Shiva Baby, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. But anyways, it's basically about this girl who's in a queer relationship, I think. I think it's set in New York City. And then our main character starts getting involved in this like throuple with this guy named Nathan, despite the fact that she's like in like a lesbian relationship, and then they invite this guy into it, and it's like a weird dynamic, and it explores sort of the toxic relationship queerness threesome vibes here. So excited to look at to get through this, because I don't know, I'm interested to see what my takeaways are and what I get from this story. The next book on my TBR is 4 Minutes by Natalia Deleva, and it is originally written in Russian, I think? I don't know, but it's translated, and it's very short, obviously, and it follows a lesbian orphan, I believe, and it's about her volunteering at an orphanage. I picked this book up when I was in Brooklyn. If you watched my Women's Month reading vlog, I think I hauled this in it, but I need to get to this because it's short and I'm really interested in it because I love the cover and it's translated fiction, you know what I mean? Also, it works with my nails kinda. I love these nails, they're from Glamnetics. The next book that I have here is another YA fantasy, another sapphic YA fantasy, and that is The Scapegracers by Hannah Abigail Clark. I've had this on with me for like several years at this point, but it's very water damaged because my friend left it out in the rain. It's an ARC as well, because even though despite the fact that this came out like years ago at this point, because my friend left it outside of like my house in the rain. I mean, she didn't know that it was gonna rain, but I didn't realize that she had dropped it off. Like, she had like a stack of ARCs that she was just giving to me. So thank you so much, bae. Thanks, friend. But yeah, so that's why it's water damage. But I think I've started reading the first like chapter a few years ago and I liked it. I was a fan of this YA contemporary magical realism, like witch girl who's kind of a weird girl who gets looped into this friendship circle who's trying to do a hex. Like, I don't know. I liked the vibes so far. It seems very snarky, very teenage girl vibes. And I think when writers can portray teenage girlhood well, I love that shit. I talk about that on my latest podcast episode, actually. We talk about like teenage girlhood in media and the way that it's depicted, especially queer teenage girlhood and like lesbian girls. And we talk about Dairy Girl specifically, which is like my favorite sitcom, my favorite comedy show, my favorite show, one of my favorite shows like literally of all time. So yeah, you should listen to that episode if you like Dairy Girls, or, you know, if you want to listen to my podcast, you know? Anyway. The next book I have here is another like lesbian book, I'm pretty sure. Lesbian lit fic adult contemporary vibe. It's called Sedating Elaine. I'm a big fan of this banana cover, and I think I've heard people talk about this in a way that makes me want to pick it up, you know? I'm pretty sure it also involves, it's supposed to be an exuberant dark comedy about love, grief, sex guilt, and one woman's harebrained scheme to tranquilize her voraciously amorous girlfriend for a few days, so that she might make off with her drug dealer and make soup, finally get some peace and quiet. So it's giving like My Year of Rest and Relaxation, except lesbian, and like literally drugging another person instead of yourself. So yeah, I think our main character, Frances, meets Elaine, in a bar, and then they like get together, but it becomes really intense real quick. And so Frances is like, girl, be sedated. So that's what I think is gonna happen here. Excited to read this. Love a good lit fic, sad girl, deranged woman, mentally ill, etc. story, and I don't think there's enough like queer lesbian books in that genre range. So excited to get to this. The next book I have on my physical TBR, on my TBR for this month, is Filthy Animals by Brandon Taylor. Another short story collection, and this one is written by, this is like a gay man one. I've been talking a lot about sapphic books, but this is written by a gay man, and I'm honestly more than halfway through it. Like, you can't tell here, but it's because I've been listening to the audiobook of it as well. I started reading this literally like last year, more than last year ago at this point. But I don't know why, I think I just set it down and was reading other stuff, so I really hope that I can finish this at this point, because I feel like I have a lot of like half-finished, just started books on my physical TBR that I want to tear through for this June, so I can have, you know, accomplish my Pride Month goal of reading a bunch of LGBT books. So yeah, I like his writing style. I really enjoyed Real Life, which is on my shelf and was his, I think, like debut novel. This is his follow-up short story collection. We're following these like adults and the ways that they do or don't communicate with each other. I don't know. I'm a fan. I think Brandon Taylor has written something kind of snarky about Sally Rooney though, which is like really funny and also kind of shady, because I love Sally Rooney a lot. So anyway, then I have Future Feeling by Joss Lake. So this book is about a trans man and set in Nevada, I'm pretty sure. Oh, and it's like set in the future as well. So I really don't know much about this. I think some of my friends didn't like it or like thought it was meh. So I'm excited to see whether I think it's meh or whether I get something more out of it. I love the cover. You know, I'm a cover buyer, like, and I'm excited to read a speculative fiction literary adult story following like a trans man main character and the bullshit that he gets up to, because that's, I think, what is going on in this story. Excited for Future Feeling, but also tentative and somewhat nervous because people didn't like it. I don't know, we'll see. Another book that I'm like a third of the way through is You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat, which is about a bisexual Palestinian woman who like lives in New York, who I'm at the part in the book where she goes to this like retreat for, I think, like treating her eating disorder, because she's been in and out of treatment facilities for that, and then she also has a complicated relationship with her mom who doesn't want to accept her sexual identity, and she's just like essentially broken up with her girlfriend somewhat, and it's a complicated, it's a mess all around. And I started reading this like a few months ago and then I sort of just put it down, I'm pretty sure, but excited to pick this back up again. I think our main character has this sort of snappy, sarcastic tone of voice and reading style to read from that is interesting and like, again, snappy. So can't wait to get to the rest of this and, I don't know, see where the rest of the story takes me. I don't know whether the rest of the story is gonna be set at this rehab center, because the rehab center is a bit crazy, like, I gotta be honest. So I think that's kind of also why I set it down. It's not that I didn't like the writing or I didn't like it, like, I think it's good so far. It's just that sometimes I just put things down and then forget to pick them back up again. I don't know how to explain it. That's just how I am, you know? That's just the way God made me. And next I have Hot Stew by Fiona Mosley. Still not sure how and in what ways this book is queer, but it's tagged as such. It's tagged as LGBT on Goodreads. Started reading this the other day, and it sort of follows the perspective of like a snail initially, which was interesting, but then it said something very annoying to me. I'm also trying to read this for a reading vlog that I've been working on for like fucking months now, but I mean, if you see it, you'll see it. Okay, this is the thing that really annoyed me. Books are written, ripped up, this is on page fucking 4, by the way. Books are written, ripped up, rewritten. Karl Marx dreamed of utopia while his wife cooked dinner and scrubbed the floor. His friends met on Great Windmill Street, where wind was once the means of production. So, like, I like the writing style. I'm a fan of the concept so far, and love the cover. Like, I think this is gonna be good. That sentence, though, pissed me off. Karl Marx was not dreaming of utopia. The fuck? Like, Marxism is explicitly anti-utopian. Marx himself writes about how communism and the idea of class society, or a world without class society, isn't a utopia, but rather, like, Marx's analysis himself, like, he is literally the, like, oh my god, he essentially created the field of, like, sociology, or the understanding of humanities as like a thing. like social sciences as a concept, as a reality of the world in like the Western canon of academia. Like he is who created that shit by coming to the conclusion of, if we look at the history of the world, the summation of human history is one that has to do with the development of and the changes within class society. And so his ideas are essentially rooted in that, in an analysis of capital, which, you know, Das Kapital, like his big volumes. And not to say that he didn't like devalue women's labor, which I guess is like the tongue-in-cheek way that Mosley is trying to illustrate the broad span of history within like the setting that she is starting the book off with. But after I read that, I was like, I had to put it down for a minute. I just got too fucking mad. So that kind of pissed me off, but you know, I have to read this for a vlog, and I do like the writing style. I think it's an interesting concept because I think we're following a bunch of different perspectives throughout London and IDK. It just sounds interesting, and I've been meaning to read it because it's been on my shelf for like at least a year now. So finally, the last book on this TBR for June is The Town of Babylon by Alejandro Barella. This book, I picked it up because of the cover. So love the design. It is a gay book, like a male book, from what I understand. It's a new release. I think it was on the Goodreads, like LGBT books to read for Pride Month, like article thing, which was interesting to see because I didn't realize it was until I recognized this on there. And I actually have no fucking clue what this is about. I just remember picking it up in the bookstore and being like, this seems interesting. Let's read the synopsis together for the first time. When his father falls ill, Andres, a professor of public health, returns home. Reevaluating a rocky marriage in the wake of his husband's infidelity, and with little else to do, he decides to attend his 20-year high school reunion, where he encounters the long-lost friends of his youth. Jeremy, Andres' first love, is now married with 2 children after having been incarcerated and recovering from addiction. Paul, whom Andres has long suspected of having killed a man in a homophobic attack, is now an evangelical minister and father of 5. And Simone, Andres' best friend, is in a psychiatric institution following a diagnosis of schizophrenia. During his brief visit home, Andres confronts his relationships, the death of his brother, and the many sacrifices their parents made to offer them a better life. A novel about the essential nature of community and maintaining one's own health, The Town of Babylon is an intimate portrait of queer, racial, and class identity, a call to reevaluate the ties of social bonds and the systems in which they are forged. So, that sounds really interesting to me, and I'm very excited to get to this. That is the entirety of my June TBR. There are other books that I have saved on like Scribd and stuff that I'm considering checking out and picking up, but this stack is my primary reading goal for the month. I hope that wasn't too overwhelming for you, because it is a little bit for me. And again, please join my Patreon if you want to, and if you want to see bonus content. I have, my highest tier is like $20 a month, and for that I will give you like individualized book recommendations. Like I will look through your Goodreads or Storygraph, and I will also send you these cute little bookish postcards. I have so many of these like bookstore postcards from around the world that I would love to use. And I think, you know, if no one wants to join my $20 tier, because you know that's a lot of money, I'll probably randomly select someone in my other tier groups of patrons to send out one postcard a month if, you know, you just give me your mailing address and stuff like that. So yeah, join me on Patreon if you want to see 2 extra videos a month at least. And join me for maybe some live streams, like do some teleparty watching movies together perhaps, you know, once a month whenever most people are available, or, you know, getting some of my videos like ad-free. If you want to suggest specific books you really deeply want me to read, that's another tier perk on Patreon, or, you know, giving me a video idea that like I will guarantee to do, stuff like that, right? If you want those perks, check out my Patreon, linked in the description, of course, along with all of my other social media and which you can find me. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, like a lot. And if you like this video, please like it and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in my next video, hopefully. Okay, bye.